9/11 and the neocon agenda. 9/11, the foundational event for the police state we see unfolding not just in North America and Europe, but worldwide. It's so important. 9/11, 2 days of truth, facing the facts, facing the evidence. That's what we're doing here today, and I want to thank all of you for being here. I'll be giving an hour-long speech and taking 30 minutes of questions later in the day. We have Professor Jim Fetzer, just one of the greatest minds on 9/11, coming up after we debut my new film, Terror Storm. You'll see just here in a few minutes. But I wanted to take just a few moments to talk about courage. It is so wonderful. It energizes my soul at its very core to be here with 1,200 plus like-minded people that are seeking the truth and that have the courage to face the facts and face the evidence when they see it. So I salute you for being here. William Rodriguez is one of the heroes that we have here today. There's a lot of courage. There's a lot of courage in this room right now. But think about William Rodriguez. He showed courage repeatedly at levels that if he was in the military, he should win the Congressional Medal of Honor. On that day, he was the head janitor in one of the towers. He stayed in there. He helped take the firefighters all the way up to where the planes had impacted, to where the main damage had occurred. He single-handedly guided out 15 people himself, and he was there when that building collapsed with those firefighters and was the last civilian, the last non-emergency worker to be pulled from the rubble alive. But frankly, I think the even greater courage that he exhibited was when they took him to the White House, national TV, hundreds of shows. They wanted him to run for Congress. They wanted him to be the new Sergeant Rourke. But he started talking about the bombs going off that day and the explosions before they collapsed and the things that he witnessed. And they told him, just shut up about this and you're going to get millions of dollars. And they were offering him all these deals. And he said, no, I'm not. Then they turned against him. Then they tried to demonize him. And folks, I'm one of the few people that I know who's actually been in the position when you're offered millions of dollars to shut up. And I know it takes some energy to do that, to say no. But this guy had the physical courage. He had the courage to say no to the propaganda. He had the courage to say no to the payoffs. And now he's got the courage to be on the forefront globally with the billionaire philanthropist Jimmy Walter, traveling the world, speaking to members of the Japanese parliament, speaking to prime ministers, former prime ministers in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, doing all of this, going and speaking to the head of the parliament in Venezuela, getting an investigation going down there with Hugo Chavez. This man has put himself in the crosshairs big time because he's a real man, he's got courage, and he doesn't like thugs and bullies. He's a hero. We're here amongst heroes. And again, all of you have courage for just being here. The alternative press that's here has courage. The national press that's here has courage to get this information out, to get in the arena, to put your cards on the table. I mean, it's just so wonderful to know that we've gone from almost 5 years ago with no one believing that 9/11 was an inside job but having the evidence to now in major polls, half of the American people in scientific polls believe the government carried out the attacks. But I'll be honest with you, it wasn't courage on the morning of 9/11 that drove me to go on the air and clearly lay out how it was an inside job, to be the first to do it, to predict it 2 months before, saying bin Laden's CIA, he'll take the fall as a patsy to attack the World Trade Centers. I'd seen all the indicators. I had the assets inside the government to know that was coming. It would take mindless courage to see this tyranny coming and to just give up and roll over and let my family, my children, live as slaves, and I'm not going to do that. And there's somebody else in this room that has courage, and he doesn't even want me to talk about how he has courage, but I'm going to do it. I don't care, because we need to single out these heroes. Charlie Sheen, a long time ago, got in contact with me, and he was doing research studying 9/11, one of the most informed people I know on the subject. I know a lot of other great Hollywood people who know all about it too. They're very informed, but they don't have the courage to go public and speak out against it and expose what's happened, because they understand what would happen to him. And believe me, Charlie and I talked about it before he decided to go public, and I didn't push him. I said, he said, well, I want to go public. I said, are you sure? And he knew what would happen. He knew the hit pieces, the spin machines, the things they could do. And just like flipping a light switch on, as soon as Charlie went public, we saw the most ridiculous allegations you could ever imagine. Of course, it have all been disproven as manufactured frauds. Think about that courage, knowing that 9/11 is an inside job, a self-inflicted wound, knowing that the official story is a fraud, knowing what the consequences are going to be, and going into that lion's den. That's the equivalent. That's the equivalent of being a World War II airborne ranger and charging up those beaches at Normandy against those machine gun and howitzer nests. And Charlie Sheen did it. He knew what was going to happen. He understood it. But I don't think he understood the huge effect it would have. The 9/11 Truth Movement had grown. It was growing fast. But when he did that, it was like adding gasoline to a fire. It exploded, and those fires have spread. And Charlie Sheen, what he did with those 2 radio interviews, and then what he did on Jimmy Kimmel, after he'd already been told to shut up, still going on, still having the courage, what he did, I think, is the most important thing he'll probably ever do in his life. And it changed the political landscape. Not just because he was a Hollywood guy or a director. No, because people knew the cost. They knew. People weren't stupid. They said, that's courage. That's somebody who knows we're under threat, and he's got the will to literally sacrifice himself to a great extent to try to save this country. So God bless you, Charlie Sheen. I love him. He's a wonderful person. And I stand with him. I stand with him, and I know you stand with him, and no matter what kind of garbage they spew, we know that's because they're trying to demonize a good man who loves this country, who loves every one of us, and loves free humanity. So let's stand with Charlie Sheen. We have to stand with every single hero. You take Professor Stephen Jones, who's worked at the highest levels, certifying huge physics projects and studies for Los Alamos and other major organizations. One of the tops of his field, published in the most prestigious magazines and scientific peer-reviewed publications. And this guy saw the evidence, he researched it, he said that's impossible. He talked to the engineers, he talked to the underwriters, he talked to the people that designed the building. Then he began to research, he got the samples, and it wasn't just thermite, it was the exact patented type used for cutting pillars. It was thermate. That presentation's coming up. So I salute Professor Stephen Jones, another hero. And now he's got other universities, other physicists, other geologists, others in archaeometry, others researching, reviewing, and his data is getting approved, confirmed. It's conclusive. So again, it is so wonderful. It's the greatest thing in my life next to my children to know the greatest experience, the most fulfilling to my soul, deep down. It's like a cool drink of water in the desert to be around people like this. This is the best thing in the world. This is the most wonderful thing in the world. I know it is for you too. And all of you are leaders. All of you are heroes for being here. You've got to get out there. You've got to become the leaders, not just count on us to be the leaders. We're going to win this thing by all of you going out there and waking everyone up in your area. And I know you're doing that. We have the moral authority. We have the facts. We're exposing the murdering criminals that carried out 9/11. My team, the guys that work for me, Ryan Slickheiser and Aaron Dykes and Kevin Smith and Mark McCorder and all the people, Rob Jacobson that are here, all my people that are here, they know what it's like. Believe me, the stuff they've gone through, the things they've faced, being interrogated with me in foreign countries, having people call our office and threaten us, all the things they've been through, getting past the fear, standing firm, and seeing them getting energized. I don't even have to push them to work 18 hours a day like I do. They want to. They realize that we're at a crisis level, we're at a crossroads, a zenith point. We are literally at a key point in history where all of our efforts have to be put out at 110% to expose government-sponsored terror. Now, the film you're about to see, Terror Storm, is, I think, one of my better documentaries, probably the best we've made. And it has a lot of voiceover in the first because we have to go over all the facts. Then we go to England for the government-sponsored terror there. We cover Madrid. We cover 9/11. We get into a lot of different issues. And I think this film is important to all the other great films, an accompaniment to all the other great 9/11 films that are out there, because it does something that the other films really don't do. We spend a lot of time on the admissions of government-sponsored terror. You're going to see a lot of examples here, and we could have had dozens more, but there's just too many in a 2-hour film to put it all in there, of where governments carry out terror attacks, or criminal elements of government carry out terror attacks to scare their populations into submission. So this is going to be an amazing 2 days, and I am just honored to be here with you sharing it. We could have had thousands more here. It's just there's no venues big enough unless you get some kind of stadium. We had to turn away just this week thousands of people. It was over 300 people calling, wanting tickets. Just the first few hours I announced it was sold out. So I'm sad for all of them, but there are some viewing areas out there for the few hundred overflow that did come. And so this is just so wonderful. God bless you all.
Presenting our next speaker is a man who needs no introduction. His recent courageous radio and television interviews have sparked a worldwide momentum in favor of the 9/11 truth movement. He is the star of over 100 major motion pictures, including Wall Street, Red Dawn, and Platoon. Currently, you can see him on CBS's 2.5 Men. Ladies and gentlemen, the indestructible Charlie Sheen.
Thank you all. That is so moving. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Good evening.
Thank you.
Everybody's making a big deal about what I did, and I just felt like I was pursuing the truth. That's all. But I want to talk about what we're doing today, more specifically. We are here today to effect a change. We are here today to ask those still sleeping to wake up and join us. We are here today to present a case forged in science at the bedrock and common sense in its foundation. We are here today to fire a warning shot across the bow of mainstream media to remind them of their original responsibility as civil and political watchdogs. We are here today because fear is never a good enough reason to do nothing. We are here today to fuel the deconstruction of the official myth. We are here today to hold our course, to bang our drums, to sharpen our focus. We are also here today to exercise our right to assemble. Our right to speak freely. and our right to choose. We are here today to begin draining the cesspool of lies and distortion we refuse to drown in any longer. We are here today to unleash a juggernaut of truth. We are also here today to honor the victims and the families of 9/11. We're here today for our children. As well as their children. In our country's great history, every seminal movement, every groundbreaking event, every pioneered moment began with one person. A person with a vision, a person with an undying passion, a person who could not and would not do nothing. A person who risked everything to stand naked in the eye of the storm, in the mouth of the beast, in the crosshairs of oppression. We are blessed to have such a person with us today. A true patriot, a real American, a genuine hero. It is with great honor that I introduce our next speaker. Please join me in welcoming my friend, my comrade, my brother in arms, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Alex Jones.
I want to thank all of you for being here, and Charlie Sheen and everybody. Charlie, I'm not going to keep you up here too long, but what's it like to see all these energized people? I mean, this was your idea, really, originally, to have a truth convergence here in Los Angeles. What do you think of this?
This is real, and it's inspiring.
I'm inspired by your speech, I know that. Lastly, what was it like when you took that plunge? Because we talked about it. I mean, Charlie knew what he was doing. He's not a stupid guy, he's smart. What was it like when you took that plunge, when you decided to go public and speak out, when everybody else, in Hollywood seems to know what's going on? They didn't have the will that you had, the courage. How did you do that?
I just got tired of listening to the lies and knew it was time to do something, but that specifically that plunge was like, I guess, jumping out of an airplane, not knowing if I had a parachute.
Well, Charlie Sheen, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank the crowd for being here, and I'm just honored to have you here with us. There's no way to top what you said. It was like Shakespeare.
Oh, please.
No, it was.
Come on. You're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Charlie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. So a lot of you came here at great expense, and I do really appreciate that. And we've been amongst a lot of heroes, a lot of good people, wonderful women and men, because we know the truth. We understand 9/11 is being used to destroy every fundamental liberty that we hold dear, that makes us free human beings. And I wanted to just briefly, because it hasn't been addressed fully, I think, Webster Tarpley spent a few minutes on the time he had on C-SPAN this morning, to talk about just what we've seen the last month. In the same day in England, there was a raid with hundreds of police, 40 plus on one house. They go in, they shoot the innocent person, no terrorist connections, no weapons, no nothing. But that was in the back of the paper 4 days later. For days we heard they busted a cell of terrorists. And the general public, who just might glance at a newspaper for 10 minutes while they're eating breakfast, while their children are tugging on their sleeve, they just hear the government saved us from terrorists. Turns out it was totally staged. The British government knew that. Before I even hear the news, when I first hear somebody tell me, did you hear about the new cell they busted? I go, let me guess. They busted it, there were no weapons, it was all made up, it'll be in the back of the paper in 3 days. And at the same time, they grabbed 20-something people, had to release a few of them because they had no connection to anything. 17 of them were teenagers ranging, ages 16 to 24. They'd had provocateurs, government agents, Royal Mounted Police, going in and actually organizing young people. It's not happening. It's like if I went out in the crowd and tried to recruit people for terrorism. And then if I could just get you drunk, a lot of times they take them to bars and give them whiskey. Literally, this is in the news. And then they'll get them drunk and they'll shoot their mouth off about something, and then they'll deliver a couple thousand pounds of fertilizer to their house, the police will, and then they'll bust them and say they had bomb-making materials. And we saw the same thing 2 days ago in Florida. This time it was even sadder. They went in and found a bunch of disadvantaged youth, found a lot of the street kids. That's now being admitted, even in the mainstream news they're having to admit. And first didn't tell them we're going to be terrorists. They said, here's $50,000. We love Jesus, and we're going to build an army of God. Here's $50,000. And then, these are kids that don't even have parents, have never had a future, nothing. Someone's telling them. And then a month later, they've got them saying, well, we just want you to wear camouflage. Well, we want you to wear boots. Well, we want to rent you a warehouse. It took the government, I was watching the news today, 14 months and tens of thousands of dollars every month to take a bunch of disadvantaged kids in Florida and to finally get them with the FBI running video cameras, with the FBI agents and informants leading the meetings. Okay, here's more money. Now say you pledge allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And I made the comment in an earlier speech, I could go to Austin and I could go recruit in a few days a bunch of homeless people. And I may actually do this just to demonstrate this. But so they can't say I was actually recruiting a real terrorist cell, I'm going to recruit 10 homeless people to attack Mars with laser beams that fire from their noses. That way they can't say it was a real weapon. It'll have to be so ridiculous so they don't set me up. And I'm saying on record, I'm going to do this. And it's going to seem like I'm being mean to these people, but at the end I'll give them a bunch of money and they'll be happy. The point is I'm going to do this just to demonstrate what the government is doing. We have to show people how this is done. This is done over and over again. Let me tell you how criminal this government is. Long before 9/11, I knew the government were provocatory and carrying out terror attacks because I'd researched it, but we tried to build a World War II veteran a new home. Joe Campana, he died 2 years ago, but he enjoyed his new home for 4 or 5 years. In 1998, Joe Campana, World War II, highly decorated vet, he wouldn't brag about it. We just saw the stuff in his house in a crate we were taking out and they were going to bulldoze it. He'd been an atomic soldier. He'd been at Bikini. And his house was leaking, falling in. Nobody'd help him. He wasn't mentally ill. He was very intelligent. At the same time, he didn't want to go get his welfare. He wasn't even getting the government checks. They hadn't been giving them to him for years. He didn't know how to go through the bureaucracy to get it. People who really need it never really can get it. Just crooks that work the system can. And so he would, all over town, he was known, he'd go pick up cans, walking all day with these big bags of cans. And I learned about the story. They were going to bulldoze his house, and I thought, well, we'll just do something nice. We'll go down and we'll fix his house. And these horrible police showed up and with some city people. And I didn't know that he had 2 acres there, about an acre and a half, and it was worth around $500,000+ as some developers wanted it. We later learned that. They're being real mean to us, said, you got to get a permit. We're saying we're going to try. They said, well, it's condemned. You're not allowed to. And I said, fine, we'll just build him a new house. And they had undercover cops out there on that property day after day going, we need to kill politicians. We need to bomb things. And I'd say, just knock it off. I'd get cameras. We'd follow them out. They'd get in unmarked cop cars. I mean, that's how evil our government is, folks. They didn't want citizens coming together and doing something good because the government didn't do it. They didn't want people building a new house for a veteran. And the government got so mad, and the corporate interests that controlled them got so mad because they didn't get to take that piece of property there in Hyde Park in Austin, Texas. And by the way, it was worth, I was told, over $500,000 back in '98. That land's worth like $1 million now. And he did die, and I'm told they went ahead and grabbed it. The point is he got to live out 4 or 5 years in his house. There was another old guy, another World War II vet, Roland Ellingston. Real war heroes never talk about it. And we were in his house. He had cancer. I know they have computer files, the government and city governments and the developers access it. It's happened to my grandparents, my mom's parents. They didn't have a lot of money. Same thing happened to them, and I'm not going to tell that story. And as soon as you have a heart attack or cancer, that's when they come for the property. They know. And we were there trying to help the guy when he had cancer and all that. I've never even really told this story. And I'm in there in his house and looking through his stuff. And he's this great guy who's been mowing yards since he got back from World War II, and mowing yards when he was up to like 76, 77 years old. They're trying to take his house because, again, it was off 37th Street, and those lots, and he owned 2 houses and 2 lots. He rented one of them just to pay the taxes. And they were trying to take his house, and they showed up and they said, "You've got 3-inch grass. That's junk in your yard." So he'd get out there and mow it, but they didn't care. They sent their mafia cops over, arrested this guy. He was defecating on himself in the police car with colon cancer, going to the thing after he'd had all this radiation treatment. I mean, I didn't know all this stuff back when I started fighting the New World Order 12 years ago. I just saw them, man. They're mean to the weakest people. We're fighting total scum. These are people that'll do anything just to get power, anything just to get money, anything just to get status. And they walk all over these innocent people, and that's why I'm angry. That's why I hate them. And that's why I'm going to fight them. But I don't fight them just because I hate them. I fight them because I love my family, and I got to protect my family and other people's children from these cold-hearted, murdering scum. And you're here to fight this cold-blooded, murdering scum too. Jesus Christ said to his disciples, "Suffer the little ones. It'd be better to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the deepest sea than to hurt one of these." And if you really read that in the Greek or in the Hebrew, the weak ones are retarded people. They're old people. They're people that can't protect themselves. And I'm so sick of these wolves hurting defenseless people. It's our job as men and women, no matter how evil the enemy is, no matter how strong they are, no matter if they kill us, and make no mistake, I know they're going to kill me. I've looked at it, I know. Because I know we're going to have success and we're going to force their hand. But it's worth it for the weak. The weak. They need us. We can build an army of people who know the truth, who love life, who love beauty, who want to protect the innocent. And we can smash the New World Order. We can bring them down, and we can bring them to justice. The New World Order's program of control was stalling in the late 90s. It was stalling in 2000. It was stalling in 2001. And they carried that attack out to energize their program, and it backfired on them. They have failed. They have failed miserably. They're not destined to fail. They have already failed. We are fighting for the heart and soul of humanity. We're only a seed. We're only an egg. We haven't even begun to reach our most basic potentials. We can travel to the stars. We can live longer lives. We can have clean, good technologies. We can have governments that are on fire for the human spirit. But a tiny elite is threatened by you being free. They know their dark empire can only continue when you are enslaved and when you are in the dark. And it makes me so angry to see elites that would actually try to harness and dumb down our species. It is the ultimate crime. The elite try to manipulate us with half-truths. They tell us, well, that the needs of the great masses do outweigh the needs of the few. But the truth is, if you don't guard the needs of the few and you don't protect the rights of the few, the mass is not protected either. And you have to look at it and understand. You have to know that they twist everything. Yes, it's true that the needs of the many do outweigh the needs of the few. By the way, Spock didn't invent that. That was written 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago by every major philosopher. But what that means is that the few that know, the few that are strong, they have to stand up for the many that aren't aware. That's what we do. That's our job. And that's why you're here, because it burns in your soul. As long as there's a human alive, as long as there are families that are happy and children laughing, I will live forever. As long you will live forever. We live on. We owe everything we are to those that sacrificed before us. If the New World Order strikes you down, destroys you, crushes you like a grape on the side of the sidewalk, it means nothing. You go on. You go on because you've done the right thing. You go on because you stood for what was right. The guy that dies with the most toys, that disgusting bumper sticker, does not win. The person that dies who's loved and lived and been passionate and made mistakes and done the right thing and made the hard decisions and stood up against peer pressure and that has helped people, that person wins, and history and common sense and everything shows it. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you spending time with us. I appreciate your passion. I get so frustrated that I have to brush people off because I'm running from one thing to the next. People think it's just like the thousands of emails I get a day and I can't respond. They're so passionate. They're so intelligent. They're so dynamic. It's not about Alex Jones. I feel so bad when I can't spend time with you, but I'm telling you, I'm nothing. You are everything. Every one of you, every man, woman, and child of you out there has so much potential and so many things that we can do together. So in the name of everything that's good, everything that's decent, everything that is meek, everything that is strong, everything that's worth anything, thank you so much for being here. Hello, I'm Alex Jones, and I'm the organizer and presenter of the conference we've been having for the last day. We're now into the second day, 9/11 and the neocon agenda, facing the facts. I would like to thank all of you. Some of you have traveled from as far away as Germany and Canada, and one person from Australia, for being here. I've talked to people from as far away as Vermont, and of course a lot of great people from right here in Los Angeles. I would also like to thank C-SPAN for being here and covering this event. C-SPAN has been really the only outlet on national television that hasn't just shown small portions or had speakers exposing 9/11 as an inside job on for just a few minutes. They have covered quite a few presentations by David Ray Griffin and others, the 9/11 Truth Convergence. And so again, they really need to be commended. Thank you, C-SPAN. I'm just going to speak for a few minutes, and we're going to introduce our panel and give them all a 5-minute opening statement. Then we're going to open it up to a general discussion about 9/11 and the unanswered questions and the clear evidence of Black Op, Black World involvement in the tragic attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. And then later, I believe we'll have time for about 15, 20 minutes of questions. Long before 9/11 took place, I was fully aware of the historical fact that governments, Western governments, Eastern governments, the U.S. government, elements of it, normally small criminal elements, have staged terror attacks or have manufactured different pretexts to invade countries, attack nations, or enslave their own domestic populations with police state measures. And so, opening this up today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of state-sponsored false flag terrorism. Even the CIA's own website, CIA.gov, in their history department admits, and 14 books, scholarly books have been published, including one by Herman Roosevelt himself, where our own government admits that in 1953 they staged false flag terror attacks and riots, shootings, to blame it on the president, the elected president, Mossadegh. That's part of the record. And then we have declassified documents like Operation Northwoods from the early 1960s that was green-lighted all the way up to Kennedy, and President Kennedy said no to Operation Northwoods. Operation Northwoods in late 2000 was actually covered by ABC News and the Baltimore Sun. You can read the document itself, the National Security Archive, and the Library of Congress online. Just type Operation Northwoods into Google. And I say that for the TV viewers out there because this is really a foundational document. In it, the Pentagon and General L.L. Eminster, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, proposed, not as a war game, but as an operational plan that they wanted to implement as a pretext to go to war with Cuba and then perhaps the Soviet Union, widening it, a cocktail, a cornucopia of false flag events that would kill and wound individuals, American citizens, and then other events where they would claim Americans had died where none had died. And one of the 5 different terror attacks they discussed that they could carry out to blame on a foreign government is the hijacking of a jet by remote control and crashing it, and then having a list of dead Americans, preferably students, to create a catalyzing event to get the public angry and behind a war effort. You can go read this in Operation Northwoods. They're proposing it. Also in Operation Northwoods, they talk about blowing up a ship in Havana Harbor, similar to what happened to the Maine in 1898. They talk about having Cuban Americans from the Army dressed up like the Cuban military and attacking the U.S. Marine Corps base at Guantanamo Bay, blowing up the ammo dump, firing mortars, and yes, shooting our servicemen. This is official, this is declassified, this is public. They also discuss staging sniper attacks in Miami and D.C., plastic explosive bombs. It's all discussed in there, and Kennedy, when he found out about the plan, said absolutely not. And we know what happened to John Kennedy just a little over a year later. There are hundreds of these examples. Now, there are other false flag events where people are not killed. We now have the declassified documents. The official CIA and NSA historians have admitted that the Gulf of Tonkin was totally and completely staged. The ships were not fired upon. It was simply a pretext to claim that they had been attacked, to then officially declare the war in 1964 that had already been underway for 5 years with, quote, U.S. advisors. Of course, that the Tonkin lie resulted in the death of 58,000 Americans and over 1 million Vietnamese, conservatively, on both sides. So to say that it didn't cause death is really improper, but there were no deaths when they staged the Gulf of Tonkin incident on that fateful day. So that's just a little bit of the basics on history. It's important to understand that the 9/11 truth movement is mainstream. We are the mainstream. The scholars, the members of Congress, the former German defense minister, number 3 in Blair's cabinet, members of their parliament are clearly saying that there's something wrong with the official story of 9/11. However you look at 9/11, we know the official story is a fraud from end to end. Hundreds of discrepancies, hundreds of bald-faced lies, things that are so comical it's hard to believe, but then we have to realize that most Americans and people globally just haven't looked at the facts. But more and more in the last almost 5 years have begun to look at it, and that's why in Zogby polls, scientifically conducted in the last few months, we have, 48% of the American people believing the U.S. government was involved in the attacks, and 68% believing there's a cover-up and should be a new investigation. It was a similar Zogby poll, of course, 2 years ago in 2004. So half of the American people, roughly, believe it's an inside job, and the vast majority smell something rotten in the state of Denmark. The evidence, the science, the facts are on our side. And 9/11 is a foundational event for the military-industrial complex that was clearly involved, criminal elements. They are using it to push a police state, the surveillance state, the NSA control grid here in the United States, to federalize our police, to pass the Patriot Act and the reauthorization of the Patriot Act that I challenge you to read, that eviscerates large sections of the Bill of Rights and is totally unconstitutional. And worldwide, countries are using 9/11 and other false flag events that have clearly been staged and other patsy actions and provocateur actions to take freedom worldwide. The United States has gone from the tower on the hill shining light to the world, being the most loved, to now in global polls, respected polling agencies, to being the most hated just in the last 6 years. That's a disgrace. And 9/11 has been the foundation to carry out the policies that have created this sad state of affairs. So we must expose 9/11 because, as the establishment told us, everything changed on 9/11. It's a new world. Give your rights up. Give up liberty for security. When you give up liberty, you don't get security. You get the T word, tyranny, in all caps. We all know that 19 people being directed from a cave in Afghanistan could not have NORAD stand down, could not run CIA drills that day, very similar to what actually happened, could not call public officials and warn them not to fly in the days and weeks leading up to 9/11, could not engage in insider trading leading back to the Central Intelligence Agency and other groups in our own government. We know that the official story is a fraud, and we are here to expose this and to share ideas and to move forward. We absolutely must do this for the future of our civilization. The United States of America is America and was loved because we've never been perfect, but we were the best. This is where the freedom came from. This is where people stood up against kings and queens. This is where black people stood up against oppression. This is the place where we've seen so many struggles for liberty and decency and controlling our own lives. And 9/11 is an attempt by global criminal networks to scare us into submission to their 21st century tyranny. And we say no. In closing, and then we'll introduce our panel and let them have opening statements. Do Arab nations, do Muslim nations, from Malaysia to Afghanistan, to Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, how do they stand to gain? Qui bono, Latin for who benefits. How do they stand to gain from flying jets into buildings and turning the most powerful country with the most awesome military against them? These people aren't stupid. Who has a motive? Who had written in the PDAC documents, Dick Cheney, that we needed a Pearl Harbor catalyzing event? Brzezinski in the Grand Chessboard in '97 said we need a helpful Pearl Harbor event. This is what they said. So we have all this planning, all of this going on. Who gets trillions of dollars of oil? 4+ trillion. That was at oil price back in 2001. It's almost double that now. 4 trillion in Afghanistan. 4 to 6 trillion in Iraq of discovered reserves there, right under the ground. Hundreds of billions in weapon sales. The war's now cost almost $400 billion. They say we'll be there another decade. That's the official Pentagon plans. So that'll be well over $1 trillion. If 3.5 years is almost $400 billion, we're talking about almost $1 trillion in weapons sales and Halliburton contracts. This is big money. This is control. But not only that, the PNAC boys told us we'll also use Iraq to build these permanent bases, and that they want civil war there as a pretext to stay and build the bases as a base of operations to then link up, take over Iran and Syria. Then they have Afghanistan. Now they're on China's doorstep. This is about war with China in the final equation. This is about World War III. And there's no reason this needs to happen. We must expose 9/11. It's meant to terrorize the American people and the people of the West into this clash of civilizations that they're engineering. I'd like to introduce our panel now. And I cannot do them justice. Their bios, their letters, their work, their accomplishment, the things they've done. Their service is unparalleled. I'm so honored to be with these great men today and with the men and women here in the audience. We have Professor Stephen E. Jones. This professor Stephen Earl Jones is a professor of physics at Brigham Young University who conducts research into nuclear fusion and solar energy. Although the term cold fusion was coined by Jones in 1980, his experimental work was significantly different than more controversial cold fusion experiments by Pons and Fleischmann. Recently, Jones has also investigated, and he investigated that for the federal government, by the way, the hypothesis that the World Trade Center Twin Towers and WTC-7 all collapsed nearly symmetrically on September 11, 2001, were brought down by pre-positioned explosives. In 1973, Jones earned his bachelor's degree in physics with honors from Brigham Young University and his PhD in physics from Vanderbilt University in 1978. Jones conducted his PhD research at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center from 1974 to 1977 and postdoctoral research at Cornell University and Los Alamos Physics Facility. And he has written a scholarly paper that has, of course, been posted on the Brigham Young University website, and right now he is working with several other universities and other physicists and scientists, geologists, studying some of the samples they were able to get from the North and South Tower, and it shows conclusively thermite was used to cut the pillars. Not just thermite, the patented type used for demolition, thermate. Conclusive. We'll be discussing that. It's being peer reviewed right now. There's a lot more, but he'll be with us. You'll hear more from him. And then, of course, there's Lieutenant Colonel Bob Bowman. He is the first director of what is known as the Star Wars program, or the Strategic Defense Initiative under Ford and Carter when it was secret. And Lieutenant Colonel Bob Bowman, of course, was the former Director of Advanced Space Programs Development for the U.S. Air Force, and the former United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel with 101 combat missions over Vietnam. And he holds, again, a PhD in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from the California Institute of Technology, and many, many other letters. Webster Griffin Tarpley has been writing for over 25 years on government and state-sponsored and criminal network terrorism. He is an expert in uncovering how governments and how private corporations carry out false terror attacks, murders, other criminal activities, and then blame it on their enemies. He is the iconoclastic Webster Tarpley, an activist, historian, best known for his George Bush, the Unauthorized Biography, which was an underground bestseller and classic. And we are honored to have him here with us today. Against Oligarchy, a collection of Tarpley's essays and speeches, appeared on the internet and has also been a huge success at waking people up. He is the author of 9/11 Synthetic Terror, Made in the USA. And then lastly, I'm not going to be able to introduce this guy properly, so later I hope he tells us a little bit more about himself, but he's edited many books, published books on government criminal activity, on the JFK assassination, Professor James Fetzer founded 9/11 Scholars for Truth, a group with over 300 faculty, students, and scholars who question the official scientific account of the September 11, 2001 attacks. The group was founded December 15, 2005, and has sent shockwaves around the world. It's been a magnet, a think tank, to bring the best and brightest minds in many different fields together to expose 9/11 and other government-sponsored terror events. And then, of course, lastly, I also am a documentary filmmaker. I produced 3 films on 9/11, 9/11 The Road to Tyranny, The Masters of Terror, Exposed, and my last film, of course, was Martial Law, 9/11 Rise of the Police State, and a soon-to-be-released film, Terror Storm, which focuses on all of the declassified admissions of state-sponsored terror by Western governments and, of course, the United States government, criminal elements of it. So, gentlemen, we're now going to have a 5-minute, 6-minute opening statement from each of you, and we'll open it up to a general panel discussion and then questions from the audience, and we also have some other distinguished people who will be speaking at the microphone a little bit later. Professor Jones, if you can please just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you woke up to 9/11, and then go through the incredible new discoveries and developments that you have been working on. Thank you.
We stay here, don't we?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks, Al. Well, over the past several years, I received several nudges to investigate what really happened on 9/11. And I must admit, it took me a while to warm up to the idea, but finally I did. And the first time I saw Building 7 come down straight and fast, I realized this is very curious. I hadn't seen it until just about, it's been about 1.5 years now ago, and as soon as I saw it, in a sense I was hooked. I figured, as a scientist, I can't just ignore this data. I could see that building come straight down. I'd seen demolitions before, controlled demolitions. They look just like that. A kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed. Yeah, it's got these steel columns in the center and around the perimeter, and yet it just falls straight down. So, unfortunately, I got onto a good website. Friend Jim Hoffman's site, their WTC7.net. And the nice thing that, and I have many friends now, in this area. One nice thing that they did on that site is to provide references. And I like that because then I can check, Now, I check for myself. So I go to this reference. It talks about sulfidation of steel. Gosh, that's curious. How did the sulfur get in this steel? It's high temperature corrosion of the steel with sulfur. Man, that's really strange. I went to the source, I read it, and pretty quick I'm learning about molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet, and yet it comes down, and then it's got this molten metal underneath. And where'd that come from? I mean, I hear people say, well, that would be from the metal of the planes. Well, that might work for the towers, possibly, but it sure doesn't work for Building 7. It was 300 plus feet away from the North Tower, and no plane hit it. So where does this molten metal come from? So pretty quick then, as I studied this, I wrote up a paper, which many of you have seen. If you haven't, I hope you would. Just Google on Steve Jones, World Trade Center. It'll pull it right up. And I studied various aspects, and the molten metal is my first topic. It's the one that really caught my interest, and the data is just coming together. Now, I have a sample of this molten metal. Previously, it's molten metal here. Just a tiny sample. This is really all we need. I brought along with me at the last minute. I thought, well, I'll throw that in. And by analyzing this, we determined it is not molten aluminum from the plane. Okay. Indeed, it contains a great deal of iron, which is the product of the thermite reaction. Now, thermite can be purchased on eBay, and many people, I show it in my class, physics, and I'll be showing it this fall in my physical science class. It's commonly shown. It's a very brilliant reaction. You get this white flare, this white dust, which is aluminum oxide coming off, and then this yellow hot molten metal, just white yellow hot, flowing out of this reaction. Now this thermite is so hot, this molten iron, especially when you mix sulfur in. Now it's called thermate. So sulfur added to this molten iron, it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. And we also see this molten, yellow hot molten metal with white wispy ash pouring out of the South Tower just minutes before its collapse. And I've shown this video. And it's just amazing. Photographs of that. It's in the NIST report. They say, well, probably molten aluminum from the aircraft. No, sorry, it's not. We did experiments at BYU with molten aluminum. We heated the steel pan up to yellow hot temperature, pour that aluminum out. It looks like silvery aluminum, even though the pan is yellow hot. And there's reasons for that. Aluminum just doesn't emit much of this incandescent glow. It's very low emissivity. Sorry for the technical details, but the point is the experiments show it still looks silvery, and yet out of the World Trade Center it's yellow hot. Okay, so as we looked at this, and the evidence is just piling up. This is it has the characteristics not of molten aluminum and not of molten. It's not just structural steel that somehow melted. No, it's very little chromium. But it does have sulfur and manganese and some other elements that are characteristic, you see. It's like a fingerprint that the criminal left behind. This carries with it evidence. How was this done? What was used? And I should explain real quickly. This particular, people ask me all the time, where'd you get this? Well, there's a woman in Northeast who is involved, went to one of these memorials that was being put together, the 9/11 memorial, structural steel from the World Trade Center. She noticed on it dirt clinging to the structure. This is several years ago, before I joined the game here, so to speak. And she said, well, that dirt is going to be subject to rain. It's just going to be a mess. And so she just cleaned it up. She just cleaned some of that dirt off. It's in the Northeast, and this memorial's going up. She cleaned it up, put it in a bucket. She saved it. Then as soon as my paper appeared, she read my paper. This last November would have been. As she read my paper, I'm calling for an investigation, particularly of this molten metal, and see what's going on. It'll tell us what happened, give us insight into what really happened on 9/11. Well, she immediately sent me this sample. Quite a large sample, actually, but not all of it. She said, I'm keeping some back. And I said, that's good, because we may want to, have another lab check it. Don't send it here. You'll send it to another lab directly at some point, probably. Anyway, in there, I don't think she even noticed, there's this molten metal chunks. See? In with this, just from this memorial to 9/11 and to the families, who I deeply sympathize with those families. So we checked this metal, and that's how we got it. And another sample like it, same characteristics, high in iron, manganese, fluorine. I mean, where do these chemicals come from? And then as I studied about thermite, arson, I'll wrap it up here.
No, I was checking to see if my mic was live, Professor. It's key to state you got it from another site separately.
Yes, we have two separate sites. This other one. Okay, so, but similar process, acquiring this, just private people, and so anyway, the point is, as we analyze this, I get into this question of thermite arson. It turns out that arsonists, these are the bad guys, right, start fires using thermite. I mean, you can buy this stuff on eBay. It's not like it's a secret or something, and I don't recommend you play with this stuff, by the way. It's very dangerous. Okay, molten yellow hot iron pours out of this. It's highly dangerous, but it will cut through iron. So arsonists use it, and now there's a whole field then of investigation. Investigators know how to look at this metal, and we will be working with others too, and making sure of our results. And so, but these things are coming together, this chain of evidence. This is not the only thing. This is just one of the things. The collapse of Building 7 is another. Studied that. A great paper by Professor Cutler is in the Journal of 9/11 Studies. Bickford.com. You can look that up. His paper on the collapse of Building 7. And so anyway, this chain of events leads me to reluctantly conclude that indeed there does seem to be insider, in other words, not just the hijacked planes, but also others involved setting these thermite cutter charges in the World Trade Center to bring them down. And this again leads to the conclusion that our Constitution, which is our heritage as Americans, I love my country, I love the Constitution and the people in America. I'm afraid that our Constitution is literally hanging by a thread at this stage. And
Professor, can you specifically, because you've talked about this on my radio show, you published it, you looked at the thermite, you tested, it's not just thermite, it's the patented thermate.
with the sulfur.
With the sulfur on top of it as an accelerant. Then we expand on that. This is even patented. This is actually used to cut large pillars.
It's true that when you add sulfur to the thermite, it now cuts very quickly through steel. And again, do you remember earlier I spoke of this paper I read? These metallurgists in Massachusetts had looked at World Trade Center 7 steel and some from the towers also. Strange, they said, that high temperature sulfidation. Where does this sulfur come? Where do these high temperatures come from? Well, the answer, you see, we're getting at, it's totally consistent with this thermate.
So specifically, you looked at the science, and only thermite could create these molten pools that a month later were still at many thousands of degrees hotter than jet fuel burns down in the basement collapse area. And then you have the hypothesis thermite could do that. It's a prime suspect. You get samples. It's not just thermite. It's the demolition special design thermate.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's accurate. I mean, and it's consistent with these other metallurgists. See, that was in the New York Times as the sulfidation of the steel came out. World Trade Center 7, there's no airplane that hit it. And so how do you explain this? And then the towers too. And the New York Times said this is the greatest mystery uncovered so far. Words to that effect.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jones. We'll talk more about that.